cool to be here in New Hampshire. I mean, I speak at big rallies all over the country all the time, but this is awesome. Being in a place where, you know, someone will get a joke about what an agorist is. I don't have that happen too often. So I've often been told that when you give a speech, if you don't piss anybody off, you've done a really bad job. So I know in a place where you can make a joke about agorists, it's probably hard to be radical enough to actually irritate people in the crowd. I mean, it's probably easy to be statist and then piss a few people off. Hopefully I don't go that direction at all. So let's give it a whirl, I guess. So to start off, how many people consider themselves voters? Okay, pretty big crowd. Like, you feel like it's a duty to vote, or?
Self-defense.
Self-defense, okay. I've never gone, but I guess maybe my message to piss you guys off is sometimes I feel like if you vote, you have no right to complain. So maybe you're thinking, what's with the Constitution guy? Why is he ripping on voting, right? First of all, before I get into that whole discussion, let's clear up a little misconception that a lot of people have. And the best way for me to do that is by sharing a little story. A few days ago, back in my hometown in Los Angeles, I went to this really cool restaurant called Artisan House. I ordered an awesome Reuben sandwich. Absolutely love the thing. A server comes by and she says to me, "So, how was your sandwich?" And I'm like, "Oh man, I loved it. That thing was so constitutional." She looks at me kind of weird. She's like, "All right, dude, cool." And she leaves, right? The next day I'm working. I have to go to the post office. At the 10th Amendment Center, we send out a lot of stuff. We sell books. We ship out silver coins and things. Who my friend Mike Rogers here has one. So every now and then I do have to go to the local post office. You know, government-run monopoly, bad service, long lines. I had to wait 40 minutes in line. This is a short time in downtown LA. My friend's like, "Oh, how was your day?" I'm like, "Oh, I had to go to the post office. That was totally unconstitutional." And there's actually a point to these two little stories, which are both lies. But don't believe most speakers. The point is, there's a reason people don't use the word constitutional and unconstitutional the way that I'm doing it. It's because of a very simple thing. The word constitutional does not necessarily mean the same as the word good. And the word unconstitutional, quotes, does not necessarily mean the same thing as the word bad or awful or suck. So, for example, a lot of Michelle Bachmann fans here? That was a joke. Come on. So when Michelle was still running for president, she would all, hammer on Mitt Romney a lot about his Romney Care plan, which was absolutely awful, obviously. I mean, it's probably evil and immoral and unjust to force people into something like this. I agree. But Bachmann got it wrong. She would say, "Romney Care is totally unconstitutional." I'm from Wisconsin originally, so I can do that accent. Well, the fact of the matter is that the Constitution allows people in their states to do a lot of bad or dumb things. So if she said Romney Care is a horrible or an evil thing, she would have been right, but referring to it as unconstitutional is bad, is wrong. And then back to the post office example, I mean, me waiting in line 40 minutes is a real thing. Sometimes it's an hour, if you wouldn't believe it. But let's say UPS, for example, decided that they wanted to resist this constitutionally enforced government monopoly and start delivering first-class mail. It would probably come cheaper, it would come faster. They'd probably smile and say, "Hey, welcome to UPS. We appreciate your business," which never happens when I go to the post office. They look at me like a criminal all the time. And this, I think, would be probably a good thing. Now, it's unconstitutional, as Lysander Spooner learned many years ago, but it would be a good thing. So just to reiterate, just because something's constitutional doesn't mean we should support it, and vice versa. And I just want to kind of clear that up. So what's the point? And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the Constitution, but I want to talk about some actions that I believe that we should be taking. So this Constitution, it's really supposed to be a set of rules that applies to the federal government primarily. And then there's some other rules that applies to the state governments, like Article 1, Section 10 that says no state shall make anything but gold or silver or legal tender, right? Basically, we've got to recognize that these rules are never followed. Governments never stay limited for long. And you can give them the best rules in the world. And I think the Constitution's rules, as far as they go, are very good. But if we don't acknowledge that government always grows, that it's the nature of power to always gain more power, we're kind of missing the point a little bit. And Lysander Spooner, who, did anybody see John Bush speak yesterday? John, good friend. He's awesome. He pointed out, Spooner was actually very good talking about the nature of government, what it does to you most of the time, because that's really what it exists for. But he also pointed out a quote that Spooner is very famous for that I want to just reiterate here for those of you who didn't see it or here in my notes. He says, quote, "But whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain. It has either authorized such a government as we have had, or has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist." So basically what Lysander Spooner was saying back in Middle American history in the 1800s was like, look all around you, and we can do this today. We've got a police state, a command economy, a military empire, kidnapping powers. This stuff is really bad. And so Spooner's argument would be that, well, either the Constitution has authorized bailouts in the Department of Education, the Patriot Act, and the NDAA, or those rules that have been written there haven't done the job in stopping them. Well, I would love to debate Lysander Spooner, John Bush. Hi, John. I agree with almost everything he says, but on that one, I've got to disagree. Think about that for a second. The Constitution is a piece of paper. And whether you think it's awesome or not, it is words on a piece of paper. It is an inanimate object. All it does is exist. It has no power over you. It cannot talk to you. It has no strength. It cannot move. It cannot talk. It cannot think. It has no emotions. And anyone who thinks that an inanimate object, no matter how good that inanimate object may be, has somehow power to tell me what to do or not to do, to stop things, or to stop politicians, is probably unfit to give me any advice. The point I'm making is that power, as I said, will always grow on its own. Rules don't necessarily stop politicians from doing the things that they do. I mean, think about it. You own a business, you make an agreement with an employee, and you say to them, all right, I'm going to set up, and I do this with my own team at the 10th Amendment Center. I mean, I don't use paper, I use Google Docs, but you give them a bunch of rules, you tell them what they're supposed to do or what the things that they can't do. Well, if there's no enforcement, if there's no one stopping them, in time, unless you got somebody who's really good and dedicated, in time they're not going to follow those rules. And I don't necessarily look at government as in the employee-employer relationship, but I think the analogy makes sense. You could limit the federal government to doing nothing, or maybe just eliminate the thing, but sooner or later people are going to want to get in there and utilize power and wield it over you, and they just do this. So power doesn't limit itself. Ideas don't make power limit itself. It's up to people to, say this is our line and we will not cross it. So obviously recognizing that power always grows, that the Constitution as it was written is never followed. Virtually, on a conservative side, you would say that maybe 80% of what the federal government does every day is unconstitutional and bad at the same time. So what do you do about it? For most of American history, and around the world really, people have basically taken three options. The first one is they protest. So for example, and I used to do a lot of protesting myself, I'd make signs that say, bring the troops home, repeal the Patriot Act. This is begging. Think about it. You don't go to a politician who just passed a law saying, oh, well, we can put a black bag over your head and take you away if we want to. no due process, no right to trial and all that, and then just make a sign. And if enough of us make signs and tell them, don't do this, people, because you work for us, well, that doesn't really, this whole begging thing is probably not a really smart choice. First option, begging federal politicians to limit their own power. Option 2 has been to sue them. This means go to 9 black-robed, unelected, unaccountable, politically connected lawyers and who work for the federal government and say, okay, federal courts, federal judges, now we want you to please limit federal power. Option 2 has been begging. And then option 3, vote the bums out. Well, in a way, this is also begging because it's asking the new bums, which they always are, to do something that politicians never, ever do. And that's say, oh, this power that the previous group of politicians left me, if they ever actually get out of office, this power that you left me, nah, I'm good. You guys can have it back. It just never happens. There's only been, I think I was over at Mike's house the other night for a nice little event, and we were talking about the amount of times that government in the United States, at least on the national or federal level, has actually shrunk. And at least from my understanding, there's only been twice that this has happened in any significant way. Back when Eisenhower was in office, and I think the other one was when Coolidge was in office, it shrunk pretty significantly. Like Coolidge maybe was like 70%, and Eisenhower was like 50 or 60%. But guess what? It didn't really last. So they voted the bums out. Government was this big. Coolidge came in. Government went down to here. Then Bush and Obama, who's the other guy? Hoover and FDR. They came in, government got a little bit bigger, and then it kept getting bigger. And then eventually they voted in Eisenhower, and it came a little down, and then it starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The fact of the matter is pretty straightforward. It doesn't matter which political party is in power in Washington, D.C., or what individual occupies the White House. Federal power always grows no matter what. And whether you vote the bums out, or sue them in court, or beg them on the streets to limit their own power, that power always grows, and your liberty is always less. I gave a couple speeches at CPAC a few weeks ago, which is why this is very refreshing, I'll tell you. Okay, I was talking on Free Talk Live last night, and there was literally a booth a couple of rows away from me that was basically promoting the banning of condoms. I'm like, this is a little weird, but that story's true. Really. So I made this prediction at CPAC a couple of weeks ago, and I think I'm going to keep going with this. I learned it from Harry Brown, if there are any Harry Brown fans. May he rest in peace. Harry was just as an aside, Harry's the only guy that I didn't know that when I heard he died, I actually cried. He was that influential on me. But I made this prediction at CPAC that I said, you know what, no matter who wins the presidency on November, I guess it's 3rd. Is it November 3rd? Okay, 2nd, whatever. Whoever wins it, by November 2nd, 2013 or 2014, government will be bigger than it was at the time of that election. I can guarantee it. And, okay, let's say Ron Paul wins, right? Maybe it'll go down for a little bit. But it's not going to last. At best, we're talking about a Band-Aid. Because sooner or later, Ron Paul's not going to live. So any people who have rested their entire hopes on Ron Paul, I'm sorry to tell you, this is not the solution to your problem.
Oh, man.
Sorry. All right, we're out of here. Forget this Liberty Forum thing. We might as well go hide in a cave. Thank you. So at best, someone like Ron Paul, or anybody, it doesn't have to be Ron, but someone thinking that some one person is going to ride in on a white horse and save you, and save liberty for all mankind, for all time, is one of the most absurd ideas I've ever heard in my life. Because politicians aren't the ones that are going to allow you to be free. It is you making the choice. And back to Harry Brown, he wrote a great book many years ago called How to Live Free in an Unfree World. So it really starts with us. So I guess the question then still remains, what do we do about it? We've got those 3 options. We've got the voting the bums out. We've got the begging the politicians. We've got the begging the federal courts. None of it works. So what do we do about it? Well, my organization, the 10th Amendment Center, we advocate this thing called Nullification. I don't know if anybody went to our Nullify Now event that we held at Southern New Hampshire University last year, but this is, well, it's an idea that comes from Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. And this is how we define nullification. Why am I having to read this? I guess it's early. It's any act or set of actions which has as its result a particular law being rendered null, void, or even just unenforceable in your state. Or you could take it down to a county or a city or a town or an individual level. So it's whatever it takes that they just can't enforce it. We don't care if it's repealed, if you really get down to it. If the federal government passed a bunch of laws and no one followed it, we'd be pretty well off. You know, if UPS started delivering first-class mail, I might actually start mailing a little bit more often, for example. Now, the mainstream, they don't like this type of stuff. So whether it's Rachel Maddow, who attacks the idea that we promote on TV, or the Heritage Foundation on the other side of the coin, they call us a bunch of dumb fools, basically. Or in Esquire magazine, a couple of weeks ago, they wrote about us as just being complete idiots, and they called Thomas Jefferson a total wackadoo. Seriously. I mean, I guess we've come a long way where the media can actually consider that to be a cool thing to put in there. So, they don't like it, but we need to recognize that we need to do this thing. Anyways, the best way for me to give an example of how this all works is to talk about an event that happens in my hometown. It used to be, a number of years back, it was every single year. Now it's grown so big that they do it 2-3 times a year. It's expanded to San Jose, Denver, probably a few other cities. It's a thing called HempCon. Has anyone ever heard about this thing? HempCon. Oh, you've been? You're experiencing HempCon right now. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, those guys, they're LA, whatever. We'll talk later. So I don't know why they call it HempCon, because it's a marijuana event. And obviously, for people who know, hemp is primarily an industrial product, and weed does other things, right? You make butter and stuff like that. So this is a pretty good size event, right? Well, HempCon, at least in LA and downtown, I'm not sure how it is in Denver, this thing is massive. I mean, I'm talking probably it's like 4,000 or 5,000 people in the downtown LA convention center. It's huge. There's hundreds of vendors all over the place, everything you can think of. And talking about vendors, are you guys all visiting the vendor tables here? Okay, cool. Because I do a lot of events around the country, these Nullify Now events like we did here in New Hampshire last year, and I'll tell you, there's no way for an organization like the Free State Project to be able to just pay for this on their own. It requires sponsors, and we all know how the market works. If you don't support sponsors, they don't see a value in supporting the event, or they can't afford it. So please, you know, buy some baklava or something, right? I did yesterday. So back to HempCon. I love talking about HempCon. I mean, all these vendors there. I mean, there's every vendor you can even imagine. I mean, there's solar power companies to help you build a grow room in your home or your business. There's like credit card processing companies. You know, we do credit card processing for the medical marijuana industry, dedicated solely to that. There's security companies help you build a secure room in your home or your business so you can grow your weed, store your weed, maybe sell it out the back of the house. I guess you don't really need to do that in LA. There's even delivery services. Seriously, there's like businesses that set up, and you can get weed delivered in downtown LA literally within 30 minutes. They blow away dominoes on this all the time. So there's actually a point to this, other than just a few laughs. Virtually every single one of these businesses, every one of them, they're either directly violating federal law, or they're aiding someone else in violating federal law. And they are getting away with it. And they're getting away with it in big numbers. If you think about it, it was about 10 years ago, Tommy Chong of the Cheech and Chong fame, he was arrested merely for selling pieces of glass. So he would sell these glass pipes, and I don't know if he was shipping them on the internet, but they said, oh, this is interstate commerce, and you are now affecting the marijuana industry, which we say doesn't exist or shouldn't exist. So they arrested the guy merely for selling a peripheral product. Now today, things have grown so big that there are literally hundreds of businesses out in the open in the second largest city in the country saying, you know what, we don't care, we're going to conduct business, and this is how the market works. It gets so big and so strong that even governments can't stop it, and that's the beauty, I guess, of the market. This is the way things are supposed to be. And you know, people have been smoking and growing and selling weed for a long, long time. Prior to, I mean, hard to believe that, but even before California back in 1996 passed Prop 215, people were doing this before the vote came in. And they were getting away with it. Many more people get away with violating these laws than the ones who actually get caught. Maybe we have a lesson here. Well, things have grown so big. Anybody spend time in LA ever? Or do you guys kind of stay away from it like the plague? Plague? We got a plague guy here? Yeah. I love my tyranny warm.
Been there, done that.
Things have gotten so out of hand on this whole weed industry in California. Now in Denver, too, it's cool to see this same California thing replicating, is that literally just in one city, my home city, there's somewhere, and it's hard to tell, somewhere between 150 and 300 retail stores selling this illegal product out in the open. You can see their shops. They have branding on their packages. Everything's like shrink wrapped and stuff. They have, you know, food and ice cream and popcorn and goldfish and all this stuff that they're selling. They have websites. There's delivery services, and they're getting away with it because there's so many businesses out there. And that's just Los Angeles alone. Up in Oakland, they have a place that they call the Walmart of Weed. I mean, this is a big box store. It's like the size of a super Target almost. And all they sell is grow room products. And they sell, you know, it's all peripherals. And no one's shutting them down. I mean, once in a while it happens. I recently interviewed, we do a weekly web radio show at radio.10thamendmentcenter.com called 10th Radio. And I was interviewing the #2 guy over at NORML. It's the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, Paul Armentano. He writes some articles sometime that are over at Lou Rockwell. His father, Dom, has written articles for Rockwell for a long, long time as well. And I was interviewing him about this, and I don't know if you guys heard about, like, basically last fall-ish, the peace president decided that, oh, well, you know, we love peace so much that we're going to start threatening all those businesses in California while we're dropping bombs around the world. And that, you know, one thing I love about Obama is he's shown the fraud of all the people that I've lived around for so many years in LA that really, you may talk about peace, but are you really going to advocate it, whether it's foreign or at home? But that's a whole other speech. So I interviewed Paul right after these threats started really increasing. And NORML was involved in a lawsuit that said under the 10th Amendment, you know, the federal government isn't authorized to mess with California's laws on weed, and they can't, you know, shut down these businesses. And he said, yeah, you know, we're doing this because we feel we want to change the law, but we recognize that even if we don't, there are approximately 10,000 businesses in California around the medical marijuana industry already, and they do not have the manpower to stop us, even if we don't get a court ruling in our favor. And again, that's the blueprint, the message. And mind you, this is only for medical marijuana. So if you're thinking about 10,000 businesses that are promoting a medical product, there's 3 ballot initiatives in California that are collecting signatures right now that are going for full legalization. One of them that's, I mean, the name is weird. It's really bad. It's called Regulate Marijuana Like Wine. I don't want more regulations even at state level, but it gets a message through to the average person who really doesn't understand the market. And this legalization bill would allow basically anyone to grow in their backyard. You can have retail shops for anybody. You basically have to be like 18 and up. This thing is polling at 62% already favorable. So people across the political spectrum recognize that, look, hey, you know, if we want to do this, whether you agree or not, we're going to make our own decision here in California, and the rest of the country, you know, you can bite it, I guess. And I guess that's kind of the whole message of the Free State Project. That's why people are coming here. Did anybody hear Peter Schiff last night? I thought it was a little weird. That he was basically advocating, like, forget about this Free State Project, just get out of the country. I thought it was a little weird. I love the Free State Project, even though I'm kind of afraid to make the move yet. I do, everywhere I go. Hey, you guys want to see this in action, please. You know, if you want to really try something, here's an option. I mean, you can try doing this stuff on your state level, or if you don't like doing that anymore and you don't know where to go to New Hampshire. So I do advocate people joining you guys here all the time.
Contrary to popular belief, we do have central heating. Be not afraid. Be not afraid.
I'm in the process of coming here from San Diego, so.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of a wuss, but awesome.
You didn't tell the CPAC guys about this, did you? We don't want that.
Oh, about, no. I actually did tell a couple of people to come up here. I'm sorry. All right, I better just keep my mouth shut. Expatriate. That's what Schiff says. Get out of the country. Schiff was there too, and he kind of blew me off, but whatever. So he has a tendency to do that. Love his message. Okay, back on track. So Walmart of Weed in Oakland, not Oklahoma. 150, 300 some odd shops defying federal law. This is really our blueprint. It starts with the individual, because really that's the whole goal of all this, advancing the liberty of the individual. So whether you're talking about limiting the government or voting bums out, I mean, that really should be our goal, although most people don't have that as a goal. At least here in this room, I'm hoping that our goal is to expand the liberty of ourselves, people next to us, let people live free, and as long as they're not harming each other, then that's pretty solid. So it starts with the individuals who, for a long time, using weed as the example again, decided to defy Washington, D.C. Defy the state, defy the local people, too, actually. And every time one of those heroic pot smokers lit up a joint, they were rendering that particular law null and void on them. And then the market expands. And more people do it. And people are buying and growing and selling a product without permission, like the baklava. Maybe someday in Manchester or in New Hampshire, there'll be someone will be giving a speech like, "Man, baklava con. It's awesome. There's literally like 150 businesses in Manchester selling baklava without permission." So I guess, yes, this should apply to everything. Weed, baklava, and everything in between. Guns, too. Guns would be a good one.
Which is why the Obama administration is going after weed.
Oh, yeah, they don't like weed and guns. It's a scary thing for these people.
The state started doing the Madian laws where you're making Montana.
Sure.
Wyoming put teeth behind theirs and said, if a federal agent comes in to try to enforce the law, they'll arrest them and charge them with a felony.
This is one of the bills that we promote. So this whole idea of nullification and advocating that people defy laws. We recognize that sometimes if you can actually convince your state or local government to go along with it, it can help out. So people in California, the nullification really of federal drug laws in California really did start out with individuals. That's what I'm getting at here. It started out with individuals saying, enough is enough. I'm just going to do this. I don't care. They're going to take the risk. And as more people did it, the risk became less. And more people sold and bought and consumed and cultivated a product that was illegal. And then eventually the politicos, I understand there's the non-political types here and then there's the political ones here. There's a lot of conflict. I think there's a lot of ways for all of you to work together, and I think California is a great example of how this convergence of the civil disobedience, the resistance, and the political action at the same time in the same place can actually produce great results. So I would say keep focusing on your own track, what's best for you. My friend Anthony Gregory always tells me, he says, he's pretty hardcore, but he never, ever tries to direct someone away from doing something that they feel is best for them in regards to liberty. So if you believe that voting is right, even though I have not done it, I would say if you've got somebody who really does represent liberty, then, go do it. But anyway, so this convergence of non-political and political action at the same time, you started out in California, and everywhere, people defying the law, and eventually voters decided to say, hey, yeah, we're going to vote in this referendum that backs you up, And now 16 states are doing basically the same thing. It starts out with individuals, then you get a little bit of state law action on it, it adds a little bit more legitimacy to it, and things actually have been progressing. And the feds still do threaten businesses in California, and every now and then they do a pretty high-profile bust. And you'll hear about it like, oh my God, the medical marijuana industry in California is collapsing. I've got a spare bedroom. Anybody want to come and hang out and do a little tour? I mean, you go down to Venice Beach in California, John Bush saw this, literally every other storefront was a weed doctor. I mean, they're not selling it out of those, that's the other 200 retail stores, but every other storefront down a whole strip is basically violating federal law. Out in the open, no one's bothering them, they're just doing it, they're handing out flyers, oh, get a, you know, 80 bucks, 30 minutes, you know, maybe it's probably 120 now in the tourist area, so come on in, we'll help you violate the laws. I even have friends who have come in from Wisconsin that, you know, they basically said, oh yeah, well I'm living at this address. Here's my $100. So then they get a card to show home as a token of their visit to California. So every now and then the feds, and we've heard from Obama, they're getting very aggressive. But if you really think about it, keep this in perspective. We're talking about 10,000 businesses operating freely. You know, free market, capitalism action, all this really bad stuff happening. 10,000 businesses operating every single day in comparison to maybe one business per month. The pendulum on the direction towards freedom is really one-sided. There's probably more fully federally legal businesses that are getting busted by the IRS than the ones who are defying the feds and the DEA and the Supreme Court every single day. So that's my positive message, rather than focusing on the fact that, oh, these feds, they're evil and aggressive, which they are. But the point is, when enough people say no to Washington, D.C., and enough people decide that, you know, let's try to get some states to back us up as well, or some counties or towns or whatever, it really can have a serious effect, and it makes it almost impossible for the feds to force their mandates, regulations, and laws down our throats. Okay, I don't want to ramble on too long on this stuff, but let's get back to my rip on the voting thing here. So the Constitution guy is insulting me for going to vote. Well, Spooner, even though I disagreed with him on thinking that a piece of paper can somehow limit federal power without people actually saying, no, this is a line that will not be crossed, I will enforce what I think is my liberty instead, and getting together with other people to do the same. Even though I disagree with him vehemently on that, because I don't think inanimate objects can do anything, but I do agree with him on this one. This is a really good quote. He said, quote, "A man is no less a slave because he is allowed to choose a new master once in a term of years." Well, that Constitution guy is pretty radical. So my message really here is that if all you're doing is pressing a button or pulling a lever, I don't know, I haven't really experienced this. If that's all you're doing every 2 or 4 or 6 years, or you're putting together a sign that says, please don't kidnap me. I demand, employee, that you stop kidnapping people or bailing companies out. If that's all you're doing, we need you to do more. Liberty, the cause of liberty is very great, and it needs a little bit more action and a little bit more courage. When Rosa Parks refused to move to the back of the bus, she told us what we're supposed to do. She gave us some great advice on how to deal with any particular law that is unconstitutional or immoral or unjust. And when every single person who decides that, I'm going to light that joint even if they say that I can't, and they get away with it, most of them do, they are also teaching us what we should do for every unconstitutional, immoral, or unjust law. Instead of complying, Rosa Parks didn't just comply and then go home and make a sign that says, Politician A, let me sit at the front of the bus. Rosa Parks didn't comply and then go home and get involved in an expensive lawsuit in the hopes that the judges were going to overturn, their buddy's power. Rosa Parks didn't comply and then go home and say, I'm going to run for office and change things. She did something that each one of us need to do a little bit more often, and that's use a word, one single word that a 3-year-old will use all day, and it's 2 letters, N-O. And that's really my entire message if you really want to sum it up. However you do it, we need a little bit more no in our lives. Because we don't need no stinking permission to be free. We need to learn how to be free and exercise our rights, whether they, the government, wants us to or not. Thank you.